You ever think about those moments in a lab or a manufacturing plant when like something needs to change?
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's a piece of equipment, getting old or a process that could be better, more efficient.
Yeah.
But like, how do you actually make those changes without causing a whole bunch of problems? I mean, you could even end up like putting a product at risk, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's what we're looking at today.
Yeah. And that leads us right into change control,
Yeah.
managing these modifications effectively. And I think when people first hear change control, they just think paperwork,
Yeah. Forms.
a bunch of forms.
Mm.
And yeah, it's definitely important, but it's way more than that. It's a whole process designed to keep things safe
Yeah.
and high quality.
So for this deep dive, we looked at a bunch of sources. The regulations, 21 CFR Part 11, 110, 111, all the way to 330, even GRAS.
Oh, wow.
We've got international guidance like ICHQ series and S series,
Hmm.
some industry publications, even transcripts from YouTube, experts talking about GMP.
Nice. Yeah.
So we're really coming at this from all angles.
I like it.
So what we're trying to do today is pull out those essential steps and principles of change control, looking at how a change is evaluated,
Yeah.
how it's approved, and then how it's actually implemented,
Right.
and why are risk assessment, impact analysis, and documentation so important.
Yeah. It's critical.
We really want to leave you with a clear picture of how to manage change effectively in these, really strict environments.
Absolutely.
So let's just start with, why is change control even necessary? Why can't we just replace a part on a machine and call it a day?
That's a great question, and it really gets at why this is so important. Changes are going to happen in manufacturing
Yeah.
and labs.
Yeah.
Equipment breaks, needs upgrades. Sometimes there are ways to improve processes or there are new challenges you've got to address.
Yeah.
Even those documents that guide everyone, like SOPs, they have to be updated, right?
Right.
Things are always changing.
Yeah, it's constant.
Yeah. But here's where things can go wrong. If these changes aren't managed carefully, it can be a big problem. You can even compromise the entire product.
Wow.
Think about it. If you're making supplements or drugs, an uncontrolled change could impact the identity, the strength, the quality, the purity.
Yeah.
These are all key attributes, right? And they're in the regulations, 21 CFR 310.3, 21 CFR 111.70. And then there's also the issue of compliance. If you make changes without control, you could violate regulations, different parts of the CFR.
Mm.
And then in a lab, like we saw in that EAS consulting group video, no change control can really threaten your data.
Right.
You can end up releasing bad data.
So it's really not just about fixing the thing right now. It's about understanding how it affects everything else.
Exactly.
I remember that YouTube video on GMP basics.
Oh, yeah.
They really made a point about building quality into every step.
Yeah.
That includes how you manage changes.
Absolutely. Change control, that's how you build in quality, how you maintain it.
Yeah.
So let's look at the process itself. First step, evaluation. Someone proposes a change, and that's when things get serious.
Okay, evaluation. What does that look like in practice?
So the evaluation phase is all about two main things, risk assessment and impact analysis. Risk assessment, you see it in ICH, Q9, R1. It's all over industry publications.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing is trying to find those potential hazards that the change could introduce or make worse.
So like looking ahead to see what could go wrong.
Exactly. What could go wrong with the product,
Yeah.
with the process, with the people.
Mhm.
You're using specific tools, methodologies to really identify, analyze, and evaluate these potential risks.
Wow.
Then you've got impact analysis. This is where you figure out what effects the change could have
Okay.
across the board.
Can you give me some examples? Like, what are you looking at specifically?
Of course. First off, those product quality attributes we talked about.
Yeah.
The identity, strength, quality, and purity. Is this change going to change any of those things in a bad way? Then you think about the actual processes. Manufacturing, packaging, labeling, even storage. This falls under 21 CFR 111.
Yeah.
How does the change affect how these processes happen?
Got it. So like if you were going to use a new filter in the manufacturing line, you'd have to think about how that might affect the purity of the product.
Exactly. And equipment, that's another big one. You have to look at how the change affects the equipment itself,
Okay.
including its qualification, calibration. Remember that YouTube video on the GMP lab? They talked about DQ, IQ, OQ, PQ,
Mm-hmm.
design qualification, installation qualification, operational qualification, performance qualification. It was really interesting. They mentioned even moving an HPLC instrument a short distance could have an impact.
Really?
Yeah, like what if it's too close to an air vent, so you might need to requalify it. even simpler things, pH meters, balances. They might not need full qualification, but they definitely need to be calibrated.
Right.
21 CFR 111.27. It shows that even small changes, you got to be careful.
See, I wouldn't have thought about that. Just moving something a little bit would mean all that. That HPLC example, it really shows how detailed you have to be.
Absolutely, and it doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
You also look at documentation, SOPs, test methods, batch records. That EAS consulting group video, they said test methods have to be in the SOPs, very specific.
Right.
Any
Okay.
change to a process or equipment, you might have to update the documents. And then you've got regulatory compliance, all those CFRs. Could this change mean you're violating something?
That EAS video also talked about mix-ups and contamination in a lab setting
Oh, right.
and how that can mess up your data.
Exactly. So changing lab equipment or even just the layout could impact data integrity.
Right.
So you can see this evaluation, it's a deep dive. And for you listening, this is why even a small change can take a while and need a lot of justification. You're making sure nothing is compromised.
Wow, that's really thorough.
Huh.
Okay, so you've evaluated the change.
Uh-huh.
You know the risks, the impacts, what's next.
Approval. And it's not just one person saying yes. It's a bunch of people from different departments looking at the data and giving the okay.
Okay.
Usually it's quality control, manufacturing, regulatory affairs, maybe others, depending on the chain.
So different experts weighing in.
Exactly. And the regulations, they emphasize the quality control unit. 21 CFR 115B, reprocessing batches that don't meet standards.
Yeah.
That needs QC approval. They're the gatekeepers.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're making sure everything still meets the standards.
Exactly. And 21 CFR 115A
Mm-hmm.
says you have to have written procedures for reprocessing.
Mm-hmm.
So if a batch needs to be redone, it's done the right way. It increases the chances the batch will meet the standards after reprocessing. So approval, it's not just a yes, it's based on this evaluation
Yeah.
and on procedures.
Okay, so we've got the evaluation, the approval, and now we make the change, implementation.
Right. Implementation, you're putting the change into action. There's a whole plan for it.
What's in that plan?
So a big part is updating those SOPs we talked about.
Yeah.
There's actually a checklist in a lab audit guide
Yeah.
for good SOPs.
Mhm.
They have to be current, clear, easy to find, and you have to review them regularly. So if the change affects an SOP, you have to change the SOP.
Got it.
And another part is training. Anyone affected by the change has to be trained. New procedures, modified procedures, everyone needs to know what to do. 21 CFR 211.25A that talks about how personnel need the education, the training, the experience to do their jobs. And they need ongoing CGMP training to stay up to date.
Right, so it's not just changing the document. You have to make sure everyone knows about it.
Yeah. And then the implementation plan also needs to have ways to check that the change is working, that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Maybe you have to do some tests, inspections, something to confirm everything's good.
So evaluation, approval, implementation, it sounds very structured, but I keep hearing about documentation. Where does that fit in?
A documentation, that's key.
Mm.
It's not just one step, it's the whole thing.
Mm.
There's a saying in GMP, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. You see it everywhere, that lab audit guide, the Whitehall Training GDP webinar. It shows how important these records are.
So every decision, everything you do has to be documented.
Yeah, everything from the beginning, from that first proposal, all the way to that final check after you implement the change. Every stage needs to be documented accurately, completely, and on time. That Chaos Lunch and Learn webinar, they said accuracy, completeness, and timing are key. Ideally, you document things within 24 hours
Wow.
while it's fresh.
Okay, what kind of documents are we talking about specifically?
So you start with that change request form. What's the change? Why do you need it? Then you have the risk assessments, impact analysis, all those potential hazards effects,
Mhm.
the approval records, who looked at it, who said yes, then the implementation plan, how you're going to do it, training records to show people were trained, and finally verification reports to show the change worked.
So it's a whole history of the change.
Exactly. And it's not just paper anymore. 21 CFR,
Right.
in that GMP ISO quality audit manual they mentioned, for electronic records in open systems, you need things like encryption to protect the data,
Yeah.
and you need digital signatures or something equally secure to verify who's signing and to make sure nobody's messing with the record.
Okay, so we made the change. We documented everything. Is that it?
Not quite.
Yeah.
Change control, it's not a one-time thing. You have to monitor it. You make the change. You watch to see if it's working right, if it's causing any problems you didn't expect.
So you keep an eye on things even after the change is done?
Yeah, you need a good quality instance system. In a lab, if you get an ODOS, out of specification result, like they talked about in that EAS video, you have to investigate it.
Okay.
Analytical testing, microbiological testing, you need to find the root cause. Was it the change?
What if it was the change? What do you do then?
That's when you do KPA,
KPI.
Corrective and Preventative Action.
Right.
It's a big part of the quality system. It's all about managing risk and constantly improving. You find the root cause of the problem, fix it, and then you put things in place so it doesn't happen again. That KPA handbook says you got to get to the root cause to really fix things.
So it's a loop. Make a change, watch it. If it's not right, fix it so it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. To make this a bit more real, let's look at some examples.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, let's say you have a new UVV spectrophotometer in a lab. It's in that Analytical Quality by Design handbook.
Okay.
You don't just plug it in. You have to choose it carefully, make sure it fits what you need. Then you do IQ, OQ, PQ. Installation qualification, operational qualification, performance qualification.
Right.
It's in the EAS video, validation guides. You make sure it's installed right, that it works, that the results are good. And then you have procedures for calibration, 21 CFR 111.27, and you have SOPs, how to use it, how to maintain it, how to troubleshoot it.
So a new piece of equipment, that's a whole change control cycle.
It is. Now let's say you're making tablets. That's a common dosage form, 21 CFR 210.3.
Yeah.
And you want to change the process, maybe change the mixing time, or use a different supplier for an excipient.
Okay.
You have to figure out how that affects the tablet, the hardness, the disintegration time. It's in a guide for analytical chemistry. This kind of change, you'd probably need process validation. It's in FDA guidance, validation plans. You have to show that the new process still makes good tablets. And you have to update the master production and control records, 21 CFR 211.186.
So even changing the process, that needs this careful approach.
Yes, and one last example, documentation.
Yeah.
Say you need to update an SOP for a test method. Maybe you have a better technique now. You have to have people review the new SOP. Someone has to approve it, and everyone who uses it has to be trained.
So these examples really show how important change control is, how widely it's used.
They do. And they show why it's so important for quality and compliance.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Effective change control, it's a system, it's documented, and it never really ends. You evaluate every change. That means risk assessment, impact analysis. Then you get approval from the right people. Then you carefully implement the change, and you keep watching to make sure it's working. Documentation is key throughout. Risk assessment, impact analysis, and documentation, those are the pillars of change control. That's how you protect quality and stay compliant.
By understanding this, you really see how much goes into making sure the products you use are safe and high quality. It's a lot of work.
It is. And here's something to think about. We talked about manufacturing and labs, but these principles, evaluate, understand the impact, document, they're useful in other areas too. What about your life, your work? When you make changes to plans, strategies, even habits, you have to be careful. Think about how these principles might apply to you.
That's a great point. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.